Welcome everyone to this Institute of Air Quality Management Early Careers Network webinar on artificial intelligence in air quality. We are delighted to be joined by two speakers today. We have Early Careers Network member Tiffany Cheung from Arup and our keynote speaker Adam Taylor, CEO of ARM Environments. Our original planned second keynote speaker, Jamie Clayton, is unfortunately not able to attend today, but we're still on track to run a strong and insightful event. My name is Jekabs Jursins. I'm an air quality consultant at Ricardo and also a subcommittee member of the IAQM Early Careers Network, and will be chairing today's event. Just as general housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the Institution of Environmental Sciences YouTube channel. And throughout the webinar, there is the opportunity to ask questions via a Q&A box. We will respond to these questions at the end of each of the speakers' presentations today, but you're able to ask questions at any time throughout the webinar, and there is also an option to ask these questions anonymously. So thank you so much for attending today's webinar. It's great to see so many people in attendance. And we'll just start with a few words on the Early Careers Network, mainly as an overview for the benefit of those who have recently joined as members and as a general refresher. So as you may well be aware, the Institute of Air Quality Management is a membership organization for ambient and indoor air quality professionals. And by being part of this organization, you're signaling your expertise in the field, and also you gain access to our extensive resource and events calendar. Specifically, the Early Careers Network group is tailored to the benefits, to host benefits for those at the start of their career in air quality, beyond the standard services provided through IAQM and IES membership. So, as stated, the Early Careers Network is aimed at those early in their careers and is open to everyone within reason with certain caveats. But it's open to anyone within the public, private, academic sector, and it's a great opportunity to expand your network and meet others in the similar career paths, and also opportunity to share knowledge and develop your career skills further. So the Early Careers Network offers a variety of services to its members, such as events, where we aim to run a couple of events a year, both in person and as virtual events such as this webinar. We had the January visit to the Shoreham by Sea Emissions Research Centre, which is run by Ricardo. So that was hosted earlier in January of this year, and we had quite a good turnout, and some positive feedback for that is given in our newsletter. The Early Careers Network is also part of IAQM's Routes to Clean Air conference, where we had a very strong slot in last year's event in October of 2024. And this year's event is going to be hosted on the 20th and 21st of October at Woburn House in London. And we are eager to host a similarly strong event and sort of fly the Early Careers Network flag at this year's Routes to Clean Air. We also are planning some summer and winter networking events, and these details will be shared with you in due course. We also have the Early Careers Network newsletter, where this is released quarterly to share key news, events, and opportunities that are relevant to the network in the field of air quality. The latest newsletter was released earlier this week on Monday, which is the Spring 2025 edition. And we also encourage members to get in touch about sharing any content that they would like to see included in future editions. This can include things like news, guidance, project spotlights, or anything else that may be of interest. And as well, we offer a good platform for networking and community. So on top of the ability to network during the in-person events, the Early Careers Network also offers a mentoring framework for those either seeking mentorship or seeking to share their wisdom by being a mentor. And these help some people in the very early stages of the career with a career professional development plan. We also welcome feedback and provide platforms to facilitate this, such as through engagement surveys. We'll be talking a bit about that towards the very end of the webinar. And even informally, we always welcome to receiving feedback via email or by messaging any of the subcommittee members. And as we'll go into just in the next slide, the subcommittee is ever changing, and there's also opportunities to get on board there as part of a new subcommittee membership. So who are the Early Careers Network Subcommittee? It's run by a wide range of people from different backgrounds, from local authorities to consultancies, and we're based all around the UK. Although we have designated roles, we work collaboratively both internally and with other IAQM and IAS committees. And each year, the Early Careers Network releases a call for members to apply and join the subcommittee. So most recently, myself, Kit Benjamin, and Sophie Brow joined the Early Careers Network, and we've been getting stuck in since the start of this year to organise events such as these, producing the newsletter released earlier this week, and contributing to the Early Careers Network social media presence. So without further ado, that was just a brief overview of the current status of the Early Careers Network, and we'll be getting into the two speakers for today. So I'd like to first introduce Adam Taylor. Adam is the CEO of ARM Environments and is chair of the Building Engineering Services Association Indoor Air Quality Group, and also serves as the UK representative for the Air Infiltration and Ventilation Centre. Adam's been involved in the developing field of indoor air cleaning technologies, where in 2018 he founded the specialized indoor air quality contractor company ARM Environments, and joined Air Rated in 2020 to spearhead the development and oversight of the design and operation standards. In today's webinar, Adam will provide an overview of a project which deployed an AI-driven recommendation platform to translate the data from indoor environmental quality sensors. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Adam.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, Adam Taylor from ARM Environments. So that stands for Assess, Remediate and Maintain. And we're all about indoor air quality today. And I know that's now part of the remit of the IAQM. So hopefully this will be of interest. So before I get into the detail of the project I'm going to be talking about, I'm just going to give a bit of an overview of my career to this point. Some people, they have a straight line career, they know exactly what they're going to do and they start from the beginning. I was a bit more plan C in terms of what I did. So I A-levels, physics, chemistry, biology, maths, then did an engineering degree. And then I kind of took the first job on the board when I was at university, and I ended up in building services with a ventilation company that I worked for a full 12 years, while the challenges of life were my priority rather than my career. And then after a while, I realized that I hadn't really learned anything for a number of years, and I decided at that point that I would try something else, do some other jobs. And I haven't been a job hopper since then, but I have seen my career as more of an opportunity to gain experiences and get challenges rather than to just pay the bills, which it probably was for the first number of years. Albeit working in my first job, I got to do a lot of interesting projects. So it was more thermal comfort than it was air quality at the time. So precision air distribution within buildings. Worked on a particularly interesting project at Centre Parks, which I've been to visit recently. So we've got sports halls, which can be sensitive to air movement, particularly badminton. If you're knocking a shuttlecock around, it doesn't take much air movement to knock it off course. And the swimming pool there was a particular highlight, an absolutely massive swimming pool, trying to get hot, buoyant air down from a really great height down to low level, while still not creating uncomfortable conditions to people who've just come out of a swimming pool with a lot of bare skin. So a real challenge, that one. Because of the timing of it, I was involved with a large number of projects for the London Olympics, swimming. This particular one that's on the screen here was the table tennis. Again, doesn't take much air to move a table tennis ball from the direction that it was actually hit. So that was quite a critical one. Unfortunately, a lot of these venues were temporary. So there's no legacy for me to go back and look at, but I was proud to play a part of the games. One of the really interesting projects that will be around for a long time, thankfully, is the Mary Rose. So that was lifted in the year that I was born, in '82. Sharp intake of breath there. And during the conservation of it, it was sprayed with something called polyethylene glycol to keep the ship's timbers from sort of turning into dust. And eventually the plan was to dry the hull out and then have it on show. And it is on show, and it's not in one piece. It looks like that, but brown. Yeah, the damage to it was limited. There was a lot learned from a ship called the BESA, which they lifted in Sweden, I think it was. So my involvement with this was a bit of computational fluid dynamics modeling. It was very important that during the drying phase, we didn't have very high velocities across the surface of the ship, because it was so brittle that would cause erosion on the timbers. So the whole thing had to be modeled, and we had to get lightweight temporary ductwork through that ship at an appropriate distance from all of the timbers to dry out evenly, because if it dried out at different rates, you get expansion and contraction, and the ship would fall apart. So that was a very interesting project to be involved with, which I was involved with it for a number of years. Other things that I've been involved with in terms of environmental quality, there was a Building Schools for Future program of rolling out buildings. So I got involved in some acoustic testing down at the ISVR in Southampton. That was a particularly interesting experience. One of these chambers, it's recommended that you don't spend any time in there because they're so quiet you can hear your own blood flowing around in your body. We were mostly using the reverberation chamber, which is a big concrete box, which is the exact opposite of the one that's being shown here. Then moving my career, I probably should have been an R&D engineer. I like coming up with things. My time at Breathing Buildings, I was lucky enough to be involved in a little bit of product development with them, and have done with other companies as well. Then I worked for once I started getting into air cleaning technologies, I was able to travel around Europe. The timing of this was perfect, so it was sort of 2018 to 2020, just before the COVID shutdown. So I'd had by far enough traveling in me that I did not miss being able to not being able to go on a plane. So really good opportunity to travel for them. This once I got into more of a sales role rather than an engineering role. I've done a lot of trade shows over the years. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's lonely, sometimes it's tiring, sometimes it's all of them. Yeah, good experience. I haven't put this one on here, but I've been invited to present at a number of different industry events in the past. Managed to be featured in a number of different journals, normally around air quality, particularly as indoor air quality was a big focus during the pandemic. And just in terms of my personal development, so this is an early careers webinar, my experience. Don't stay in a job too long if you're not progressing in it. So I graduated in 2004, and I think after about 3 or 4 years, I was done. I was like, right, I'm going to go and get another job. I was offered a couple of jobs, and again, due to money, I was due to get a good bonus that year. So I said, can I just join in the new year? And they were like, yep, no problem. And that was when we had the 2007, 2008 financial crash. And I hadn't left my job, so I still had a job. If I jumped to one of those other ones, then maybe I wouldn't have had a job. Anyway, then I stayed there too long. But it wasn't until I started trying to do my professional qualification, and within engineering, that was to be an incorporated engineer, which involved doing my MSIBSI accreditation. And when I first started that, when I started typing down my my experience, that's when I realized I hadn't done anything for a really long time. Got another job, got into that job. Years and years later, I started getting back into trying to get my incorporated status and get my SIBSI status. I would not recommend leaving it as long as me. It's unnecessary. Now, I think because my career was Path C, it wasn't critical for me to have that that accreditation for career progression. But I've had feedback from people, and though I'm not designing buildings every day, like most SIBSI engineers, I've heard from people that they do see it on your email signature. It really does mean something that you have gone through that process and you're qualified. So yeah, crack on with it a bit quicker than I did. And like I say, I was invited to be the chair of the BESA Air Quality Group, and I'm involved in a number of other unpaid roles in the UK and in Europe, and hopefully IAQM membership. Again, I inquired about this years and years ago. I didn't have the experience, but I will be back on it now that I've got 5 years of experience of it. So yeah, hopefully it won't take me as long as my SIBSI membership did. So indoor air quality. Appreciate that a lot of people on this webinar will be looking at outdoor air quality. Indoor air quality is quite different. So at the moment, indoor air quality, the only time you're going to get really picked up on it is by the health and safety executive. If you are in a workplace where there are hazardous substances controlled under EH40, there are chances that you would be pulled up by their agent health and safety executive. So regular testing for these. There is a market for that. British Occupational Hygiene Society, people are going around and testing for these. The limits of these pollutants are incredibly high. Just because a building is compliant to EH40 does not mean that it is a nice place to be. At the other end of the spectrum, for every building, the green table there is the pollutant limits. So those are outdoor air pollutants of Part F ventilation. These were updated in 2021 after the World Health Organization had released more stringent versions. So they haven't particularly changed for too long. And in the blue table there, I've compared the exposure limits from Part F with the World Health Organization guidance. And I think PM 2.5 is the biggest difference. We're comparing Part F saying 25 and the World Health Organization saying 5. So there's a huge disparity between that. But all that people have to do is comply with the limits from Part F. The demand to go beyond that is when people are going for a healthy building standard, be that well, fit well, or aerated. Which during my introduction, I was involved in the development of the design and operation standard for aerated. And the reason people get a healthy building certification is normally to do with money. Sometimes it's love, but quite often it's to do with money. If the building is certified as being healthy, they can charge more rent for it. There are other reasons why, if a building has got certain certifications, it will qualify under ESG for certain types of investment, easier to get money for it and to attract investment for types of things like that. So generally, it's about money. When people are going for better air quality, sometimes they care about their staff, but it's mostly money. So if you want to do something, so I'm going to go back a slide while I talk. If at the moment, if you the indoor air quality market is quite challenging. A lot of people were not particularly aware of it. COVID brought it to the front stage, and lots of people have gone out and got air quality sensors, and there's a huge number more air quality sensors available now than there were at the start of the pandemic. But I've got air quality sensors around my space. We go around different places, particularly schools. And in a drawer, there's quite often an air quality sensor, or sometimes there's an air quality sensor that's run out of battery. If you're not doing anything with that information, a CO2 sensor that sometimes says 800, sometimes says 850, it's not really attention grabbing. You really need to do something with that data. And that can be certification, showing that you're compliant, keeping records of your indoor air quality so that if someone complains that they've contracted a disease within your unventilated building, or they're exposed to a lot of dust within the building, or they're off sick because of this, or they're talking about sick building syndrome, you've got a record of what the problem is. And at the moment, as a business, we see air quality is just problem solving. Someone complains about something, and then we're sent in to investigate what that problem is. That's where the market for indoor air quality is primarily, which is a shame because there's a lot more that we can do around air quality. And as a business, air quality and from my career point of view, being asked to speak at events, being asked to provide information for journals, it was pretty constant up until the invasion of Ukraine, when the whole industry just suddenly switched to energy. And in the built environment, air quality was not the number one topic. Energy jumped straight in front of it. But these two, they don't need to fight each other. You can deliver good indoor air quality and not use too much energy as well. But you're going to need to have those sensors. So onto this project. So this was an Innovate UK funded project. It was Trustworthy AI Phase 2. The lead organisation on the project was a Surrey University spin-out called DIREC, who were primarily focused initially on occupancy sensors, using LiDAR and other technologies to position people within a room without using cameras. Really cool sensors. And then adding AI to a recommender platform to make sense of all this data. Because if you've ever looked through tables and tables of censored data, it's not particularly interesting reading. And as for presenting that to a client, yes, you've paid for that data, you can have it, client, but it's not particularly easy reading. So the concept of the project was to develop an AI recommender solution that could make sense of all this data to your average building user or facilities management company. So one of the things we were involved with is taking your PM reading or your CO2 reading or your lux readings or your decibel readings and making them easier to understand for the layperson. Now, you've probably seen air quality index, like the one on the screen. Quite often these are for outdoor air quality, and they are very international, I should say. Like in some countries, they will always be green, and in other countries, they will go from a man. So those all look pink. The dark pink and the light pink, it will just vary between the two of those. So it's I don't think these are particularly useful, these indexes. So we came up with a scoring system, and we're talking about health, productivity, and comfort. And the main sensors that we used on this project were indoor environmental quality sensors. So we were measuring PM, TVOC, carbon dioxide, temperature, humidity, also had lux in there, and also had a sound sensor in there. So creating a bespoke scoring system for that, so that at a glance, people could see what different areas within a building were likely to be comfortable for the activity that they were doing at the time, because you don't always want a quiet dark space, and you don't always want a light, lively / noisy space. So yeah, giving people that information. So there were 3 buildings, one in Leatherhead, one in London, and one in Manchester. The Leatherhead was the main office. We put hundreds of sensors in there. A lot of them were for environmental quality, but we also, within fan coils, we were putting air on and off temperature and humidity sensors, and also measuring flow and return temperatures from the fan coils, and also measuring the energy consumption, because the platform, as well as having the environmental recommender, also had an energy recommender and an occupancy recommender. And if you look at the image on the right, you wouldn't normally see that many air quality sensors in one space. But one of the other partners who were involved in the consortium were interested to see what air quality was like at different heights within the space, and I'll come back to that on another slide. So as well as indoor air quality, we wanted some data on outdoor air quality. So I think this is probably one of the first Kythera outdoor air quality sensors in the country. So this is the conventional Kythera sensor, but with a weatherproof enclosure on the outside, and we positioned that on the roof near where the intakes of the air handling unit system were, so we could measure the quality of the air inside and reference that with what effect the outdoor air had on the indoor environment. As well as that, we were within the ventilation systems putting energy monitoring on the various different fan systems that were in there. To if you're going to create an air quality determined ventilation system, then you need data on the fan speeds if you're going to control them and look for energy savings there. So in terms of that data, we then pulled all of that data from those systems into their native platforms, where we could count the detail. The image on the right is the different detail that we would pull out of a fan coil system, as shown in the picture on the left. So that initially came to the native system, and then that data was then fed into the Direct AI recommender system. So that was our part of the project. So our main thing was to select the right sensors, get them deployed, and to come up with a scoring system, but also later on to train the recommender system in terms of, so we shared previous data that we've recorded, anonymized data that we had recorded ahead of this project, and also gave the recommendations that we manually sort of came up with for those particular projects. That system was used to train the AI recommender on what it should be doing once it received all the new data from this platform. So the consortium, there are a huge number of organizations involved. So Direct were the lead organization, and we had ARM in there as well. Brunel University were involved. One of the key things with the AI is the amount of data and energy that it is using. My current frustration is everyone doing little action man figures of themselves on LinkedIn. I'd love to know how much energy is being used on that. So Brunel were responsible for seeing of these huge numbers of data points. I can't even think of a number. Huge amount of data that was being collected on this project, how much it could be reduced prior to storage without compromising the accuracy of the data. And in terms, this is way beyond me. It's clever stuff. But if you want to read more about it, then that is the paper that you want. And I won't give you time to read it. You can watch this again if you want to see what that is. Yeah, Brunel about the data reduction. The other thing, there's a lot of clients' data flying around in the cloud. So the University of Surrey, one of the aspects that they were doing was an intrusion detection system for the data that was being collected. Security of this data was very important, and that was their aspect of the project. Imperial College were involved. They were the university that was asking for multiple different sensors. We didn't put 3 sensors in a column everywhere. There were just a couple of study areas that we did that. We also put pressure sensors on either side of the room as well, because they wanted to see how people moving around the space would affect the pressure within the room. So we had pressure sensors on opposite sides of the room, and all of the pretty colors on the left-hand side, that is one of the modeled rooms where we put our sensors in, and they were doing some CFD modeling on that, and then comparing that CFD data with the data that we were collecting from the real life sensors, and then feeding that back into the system to improve accuracy. Hilson Moran, the consultant, were also involved. They were involved in creating digital twins of the building, and those are then useful to be comparing what the sensor data was and how the building was actually performing compared with what the model says and what it should be doing according to Part L. So the outcome of this is the direct recommender system, and as well as, so the concept behind this is it's mostly for facilities management companies to make sense of the data that they have the data that they have got. If you've ever looked at air quality sensor data through most native platforms, it's very difficult to it depends on the size of the building. If you've only got a few sensors, it's relatively easy. But as soon as there's a large number of sensors, trying to make sense of that data is very difficult. So the concept of the recommender is, so this is kind of the overview with the scoring that we've got here. But if you look down in the bottom right hand side, that's the recommender itself. So that is the AI powered aspect of the system. So you can interrogate your building's data using the AI recommender using normal language. So, for example, you could enter a question like, was there any issue regarding temperature in the ground floor last November? And then the recommender will look through the data. It's pretty fast considering how much data it has to get through. You're normally getting answers of this sort of quality within about 10 seconds. It will go through all of that detail and spit out some answers. But beyond like the initial information that it gives you, so it'll give you some headline figures around what it finds from the data, and then we'll go into more detail, and this can then be produced as a report for facilities managers, because we've got all this data, but what the facilities manager really needs to know is what needs fixing first. What is the priority that we need to focus our attention on at the moment? And like I say, most of the reasons why we're called to site as ARM are because someone's complaining. We don't normally get complaints about temperature. We get complaints that someone's dizzy, or they're off sick, or they've got dry eyes, itchy skin, etc. But as for most facilities management, it's because someone's too cold or they're too hot. So being able to interrogate different areas of the space and maybe find an area for someone that would be more comfortable, the recommender could be used for that. So in terms of, so the other partner that was involved in this project was Waits Group. So they provided the buildings for us to deploy the sensors in. because of remote working. They were aware they already had an issue with underutilization of the building, but the recommender was able to give them real insight into what it really was. All the building's pretty empty, but this was able to drill down into particular areas of the building to explain how the building is really being used, and their confidence in the system. They've then promoted this system to other people who via the Weights Innovation Network, which is probably worth you checking out. So that was the overview of the that project, and my message is IAQ data by itself is not of particular use because there's very little compliance that we have to stick to. In some countries like Belgium, they came up with a 800 ppm CO2 limit, which is enforceable in that country. Everyone should have the CO2 sensor and be able to get hold of that data. In this country and many others, you need to be able to get some actionable insight out of that data, and AI is a great way of delving into huge amounts of data. So a couple of things to sort of finish off on. Through my work in BESA, we have been developing a national occupational standard for indoor air quality. It's not out and it's not finalized yet. It's difficult for there to be legislation around indoor air quality beyond the EH40 numbers and the very high limits of pollutants that they got in there. It's very difficult to enforce certain levels of air quality if there's nothing to particularly stringent to measure it against beyond Part F, but also there's no people who are qualified to take those measurements. So this national occupational standard is for people who are going in and deploying indoor air quality monitoring equipment. It's not for people who are analyzing that data once the data is collected, and it's not, it doesn't qualify these people to select the appropriate equipment to go and do the testing. But if air quality is going to become anything like water quality, which is tested all over the place because of Legionella and other problems, air quality will need an army of people who can go out and take these measurements. So that's what this NOS is about. So it's recently gone out to consultation. So there'll be more news on that in the next few months. So yeah, look out for BESA, and I'm on LinkedIn too, so I'll probably be posting about it there. And one final little promotion of mine. If you would like to inspire people, tell them about the importance of air quality, and critically the roles within building services industry, we have through BESA created some schools workshops where it's fully funded. So we will provide these filter box kits. You might know them as Corsi Rosenthal boxes, after some guys who invented the concept in the States. We'll provide the components of this kit, ship it to the school, and then we need volunteers to go into that school to talk to the kids about air quality, talk to them about how careers in building services, and the hook there is they probably like air quality after your wonderful talk, and they certainly like sustainability because they want a planet to live on. So go in and talk to those kids. So that's a fully funded workshop. And if you are interested in doing that, there's a QR code there, which if you will take you to the position where you can sign up to give one of those workshops. So yes, that's all for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Adam. We do have one question in the Q&A box, and if there are any other questions, feel free to ask them in the box as well. Oh, we've just got a second one just now. I do have some questions of myself as well, if we still have time to answer those. But for the first question, Adam, we've got an anonymous asker asking, what were some of the most significant challenges faced during the course of this project, and how were they overcome?
We overcome. Timing was was very challenging. The project didn't start very fast. All the project management in the world. This was one of the biggest Innovate UK consortiums they'd ever dealt with. So trying to coordinate everyone. Fortunately, that we were just a piece of that puzzle. It all fell on Direct to do that. So one of the challenges was getting started on time. So we didn't collect as much data as we wanted during the project. So those sort of delays carried on, but the sensors are still there, so we are still able to go in and collect that data. I think the other real challenge was communicating between different members of the consortium. So I would really like to have spent more time with Imperial, going and looking through that data and getting the feedback from their modeling versus our data that was collected. So in terms of how it was overcome, it will continue to be overcome as we continue to work together afterwards. But yeah, I think those are the biggest challenges.
Fantastic, thank you. I think this next question is sort of in line with one that I was going to have prepared as well. Does the AI ever suffer from hallucinations similar to large language models? I suppose the word hallucination sort of meaning, does it sort of come to conclusions without sort of real data underpinning it at all?
Real data. When we have been interrogating, there have been, yeah, it would use the term hallucinations. Yeah, there are things coming back, and the answer is not directly related to your. It will make sense what comes back. So in a hallucination, it's not that way, but the answer that comes back is not is insightful, but it is not directly related to your question. So and another thing we're struggling with is when there is incomplete data for the AI to come to a conclusion when there's bits of data missing. That was one of the first hurdles to come over. How that was fixed, that's not my bag, but yeah, it was one of the things I experienced. So.
Excellent. I suppose a similar tangential question is how much of a limitation is the accuracy of indoor air quality sensors? And I suppose that any limitations may result in these sort of quote unquote hallucinations as well, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of certainly on this project, because of the timescales of it, we were using new sensors and they're pretty good when they're new. The outdoor air quality sensor that we chose is one where you can change cartridges on for the ROPS sensors. So for the PM sensors and the TVOC sensors, those can be changed on a regular basis to ensure accuracy. But I think with a lot of sensors, if you're doing control with the sensor, that's when it's super duper important. And now we see in industry CO2 sensors that have drifted massively, and the amount of energy that's being wasted because you're doing demand control ventilation on sensors that have not been calibrated or checked for 50 years is a real problem. But there is a limitation with the sensors, and I think lower cost sensors that are replaced more regularly, I think is the answer. And for this space, we used a combination of, in a lot of spaces, it was just temperature and humidity. And then there were less sensors that were measuring TVOC and particulates because you needed more granular detail on temperature and humidity. But generally, the air quality in a number of different offices didn't vary as much. I mean, the CO2 is important, but from a PM and TVOC point of view, we had very similar readings in adjacent rooms. So.
sorry, there we go. Sounds like a more of a strategic use of the monitoring instruments themselves is a good workaround around the limited accuracy.
Yeah, yeah, and the cost of them as well. Obviously, the more you measure, the higher the cost that you've got.
Excellent. And I think the I was going to say final question. I've jinxed it. The next question is from Miretu, who asks, is the school workshop that you closed your presentation with, is this fully funded for international applicants? As the question's asked from someone from Africa, so asks if they could apply for it as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is for it's a UK only initiative. So apologies. If you would like some details on how to build one of these kits and where you can get the different fans from, I'd be happy to assist on that. But yeah, the funding is only available for the UK because it comes from BESA, and within the built environment there is a shortage of skills. So the money is charity money that's coming in to try and encourage people to come and work in the building services sector in the UK.
Fantastic. And I think we've got time for just the final question, which is from Harley asking, how do you think this type of framework could be applied to outdoor air quality?
From a recommender point of view, could it be used potentially at a city level? If you had some quite granular outdoor air quality information, then you could potentially plug that data into it. The recommender itself is agnostic. We used a huge range of different manufacturers' sensors to go into it. So in terms of sending the data in, it could potentially come from the cloud. If you'd like us to play around with some of your outdoor air quality data, I know that Direct would be really interested in receiving some outdoor air quality data feeds to see if they can come up with something. But I think in terms of traffic management, I think potentially it could be used on a city basis. I think there could be some interest there. Whether it could be used at the moment, it's a language. It comes back with written answers rather than something graphical. So if you would like, if a member of the public was interrogating it, say, what's the cleanest way for me to get here and there to avoid the pollution? It would probably come back with a word answer for it rather than something graphical. So yeah, maybe for traffic management at a council level might be there may be a use there.
Gosh, thank you, Adam. And I suppose this is a sort of a suitable segue into the next talk on the use of predictive AI for estimating NO2 concentrations for outdoor air quality. We do have two other questions, but I think just for the benefit of today's webinar, we'll have to close off the Q&A for this talk for the time being, but we may have time at the end to return to some of these questions on your talk, Adam.
Thank you.
Fantastic. But no, thank you for your talk. I will just return to our presentation. There we go. And now I'd like to introduce our second speaker for today, Tiffany Cheung, who is a senior air quality consultant at Arup with over 6 years experience working on a wide range of air quality modeling, monitoring and advisory projects across different sectors, which include aviation, property development and construction. Tiffany has completed an MSc in Environmental Technology at Imperial College London. And please correct me if this is outdated, Tiffany, at all, but Tiffany's also currently finishing a degree apprenticeship on data analytics with the organization Multiverse. So in today's webinar, Tiffany will be presenting on a case study using machine learning models to predict nitrogen dioxide concentrations at roadside locations in London. And so if I stop sharing my screen again, I'll pass over to Tiffany.
Thank you. Yes, so hi, I'm Tiffany Cheung. I work at Arup. It is a kind of professional services firm, international, and we work primarily in providing design, consulting and engineering services in the built environment. And up until very recently, I was a senior air quality consultant. Yeah, kind of looking at different planning and monitoring advisory across the sectors of aviation, construction, and property. And in 2021, I started the Advanced Data Fellowship, which is a program that's kind of delivered by an organization called Multiverse. It's a degree apprenticeship where I was really able to develop my data skills, do a lot of kind of data visualization, and also get into grips with machine learning as well. And yeah, that's kind of led me to now actually moving into a new role at Arup to be a senior data scientist. But today I wanted to share with you a machine learning model that I developed to predict air pollutant concentrations. So yeah, this was kind of focused in the Greater London area in the UK, looking at predicting nitrogen dioxide concentrations at roadside areas. So how this project kind of came about, to give a bit of more background, was that it was kind of actually part of the Advanced Data Fellowship apprenticeship. There was a kind of final project that we could put together, and I kind of just saw an opportunity here to try out with building a machine learning model to predict air pollutant concentration. So that's what I kind of set out to do. We currently, kind of the context of the whole project is as part of air quality consulting and air quality assessments, we predict a lot of concentrations to understand how things are kind of complying with legislation or regulations, and it can also help to inform design so that we can help to reduce kind of poor exposure to poor air quality due to its adverse health effects. And our current methods of predicting air pollutant concentrations, they involve quite a few steps, kind of involving like different Excel spreadsheets probably, and geographical information system kind of GIS tasks. And that can be quite manual and time consuming. So I wanted to see if there was a opportunity to be able to predict concentrations quickly. That could lead to some sort of cost savings. It could potentially be more scalable. So that's kind of where the whole project came from. And the project aim was to create a machine learning model to offer that kind of cost efficient, accurate, and scalable solution for predicting levels of pollutants. And then I think it would be quite useful to just go into the methodology of this, and the data that I kind of collated as part of the project. As mentioned, I wanted to focus just on a smaller scale, so I just collected data for the Greater London area, and only looking at nitrogen dioxide concentrations at the roadside level. I really wanted to see if I could just kind of compile a lot of the public and open data that was available and then see what it could come up with. Um, and and so the table on the right, it kind of shows all the information that were included as kind of the model inputs. There's the NO2 concentrations from that first line. So I got that from the London Air Quality Network. They were all kind of automatic monitors as well, and also from the automatic urban and rural network for kind of London data at an annual average basis. And then there was also because we had the information on all these different monitors, we could also extract the information for whether it was a roadside or a curbside location. And then from the Department for Transport, we collected a lot of the annual average daily flow traffic data for kind of the roads that the NO2 monitors sit on. And there I was kind of able to work out what the heavy duty vehicle percentage was. And I think a lot of these inputs I tried to mirror it so that it was information that we would normally collect based on our modeling anyway. I thought it'd be interesting to also get some information on the index of multiple deprivation based on studies kind of showing that kind of the relationship between like poor air quality exposure and also deprivation. And then there were ones about kind of whether the monitoring location is in an air quality management area, whether it was declared for exceedances of the annual mean or the 24-hour mean. Also, just some kind of other spatial information on the zones, and also whether the monitoring site was within like 30 meters of a junction, looking at kind of distance to roads and kind of number of lanes on the roads, because I thought that would probably be indicative of, you know, how many cars and how big the road was. So the monitoring data kind of spanned over 20 years. I just tried to get as much information as I could. And yeah, and then the so the monitoring data and the DFT traffic counts were the only ones that had a year element to it, and then everything else was just kind of static based on the latest information that was available. So because that air quality monitoring data was spanning over 20 years, and we know that within Greater London area, there have been decreases in concentrations just due to different types of like policy interventions. So there was kind of the low emission zone and then the expansion and then the ultra low emission zone. And then there were different policies on kind of putting in cleaner buses and cleaner taxis. There's also just like general fleet renewal. When people kind of get newer cars, you have lower emissions, and that would also be expected to have some sort of impact on the concentrations on the road as well. So I have also put together, to account for that detrending and that kind of long-term trend, I put together a simple linear regression model just to be able to do an adjustment by the year. And the graph on the right kind of shows what that line is. And I think kind of learning from this was, I think there's different ways that you can detrend the data. And I don't know if this was necessarily the best, because you can see like the points kind of just follow. They don't exactly fit that linear trend. Some are kind of like waving around, and it's not necessarily, I think there's different kind of methods. You can kind of look into time series modeling or like seasonal decomposition. Those are also other methods, and I just happened to choose the linear model one. So what were kind of the findings of the model? I used a number of regression models to fit all this data. And the model called Random Forest Regressor, it happened to have the best performing result. And that was kind of based on the lowest root mean squared error and the lowest mean average error, and also the highest R squared, which kind of it's able to kind of indicate the amount of variability that the model explains, but you can kind of see that overall it's not performing that well, because the R squared kind of spans from 0 to 1, and 1 being the best. So right now it feels like there's still areas that can be improved. And then if you kind of take a look at the RMSE values itself, if and kind of if I also refer to the kind of industry standard guidance, the DEFRA technical guidance 22 TG22, it says that the root mean squared error value should be within plus or minus 25%, based off of the air quality limit that you're kind of assessing against. And for NO2, that's 40. So to be within plus or minus 25% of that, that's 10 micrograms. So in theory, this is a model that is performing fine. It's within those limits. I know that there's also other kind of parameters that you need to look at. I just chose to do one of them just to kind of give a bit of an estimate. And yeah, I think also kind of it was quite interesting kind of looking into the features that the model was saying was the most important. So when we kind of looked into a bit further, it was saying that the roadside parameter was the roadside predictor was the one that was highest contributing by far. But that roadside predictor, it's the flag determining whether it was a roadside monitoring site or a curbside monitoring site. And I think from an air quality kind of consulting point of view, like I don't know if that necessarily makes sense. You'd kind of expect that maybe the predictors of like all motor vehicles, so kind of describing the annual average daily traffic or the distance to road, which would be kind of the more dominant predictor. So it was a little surprising on like what that result was. And it also kind of shows the importance of having that domain knowledge in addition to the skills to be able to kind of build a machine learning model. I also did a comparison of the machine learning model results against the monitored data and the third ADMS model outputs. It was based on a limited number of data points that I just happened to have access to. Yeah, I think even though the model evaluation from the previous slide, it was saying that it was within that plus or minus 25%. And kind of when you look at that headline value, it looks like it's fine. But when you actually look at what it means in terms of when you compare the model, the machine learning modeled concentrations compared to the actual, it kind of tells a different story. Even though the modeled kind of concentrations, whether it was from ADMS or from the machine learning model, there was kind of general underprediction, and like the DEFRA TG22 guidance kind of says that you want the difference to be within plus or minus 25%. You can see that the ADMS model is mostly able to do that. And so in that sense, it is acceptable. You probably do a bit of adjustment as well. But for the machine learning model output, it actually tells a very different story because only one of those points are within plus or minus 25%. And those points in central London, especially, that is massively under predicting. And it kind of shows that like perhaps like within the central London area, there's something that's like not really currently being captured within the model inputs. Another thing to point out is that because there was the linear regression that was used to account for the detrending of those temporal trends, it had the random after you had the random forest regressor output come out, and then you apply this linear regression adjustment, it has a really big effect. And I think that kind of brings back to the point about whether the linear model is actually a good model to use to do that detrending. And I think there's other methods that you can kind of look into a bit more. So I think that kind of brings us on to the conclusions of this model. So I developed and evaluated a machine learning model to predict NO2 concentrations in London. But I think at this point, it kind of provided some quite good insight, but it's not really deployable yet. And I think that's fine. I think there's kind of opportunity to maybe look at it a bit further in the future. But there's kind of clear actions where and kind of routes to follow as well. There's also, yeah, I think it's also important to just kind of point out again the having the domain expertise and like being able to understand and interpret the model. That's also still really important, and it's not just about the machine learning side. And yeah, the kind of next steps are kind of focusing on maybe the detrending strategy, looking at the temporal scope, the data kind of spans over that 20 years, but is the concentrations from 20 years and the data from 20 years ago, is that still relevant to current year predictions? I think I think there's something to look into that. The other one was about the feature selection itself. Um, and yeah, what are the inputs that are going in? Are there other ones that would be more appropriate? And also whether there are other aspects to also be considered. Yeah, I think that was kind of it in terms of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the talk, Tiffany. We do have a couple of questions in the Q&A box, though, as with Adam's talk, if you do have any questions, oh, literally, as I said that, a third one came in. Just feel free to pop your questions in that Q&A box, and we'll work through all of these, and if we have time, return to the other questions for Adam at the very end. So the first question from an anonymous asker is, were there any unexpected findings from the machine learning model?
Yeah, I think that one, when I put up the graph to show the different contributions, I think that roadside one was definitely the unexpected finding. And what's kind of interesting about this machine learning model is you'd kind of expect that if you were to, like increase the number of vehicles or increase the distance to road, you'd have like, yeah, one would kind of increase the concentrations or the other would decrease the concentrations. But because of how the machine learning model is set up, it actually doesn't follow that logic. So it's a bit of a trial and error. I think you kind of need to like dive into it a bit more to understand and interpret what the model's actually doing.
Excellent. I suppose, are there, if you were to return to the model to implement these improvements, are there any sort of rules or conditions you can set to it to say, actually, we don't think roadside sites should be weighted so strongly?
Yeah, I think there's definitely ways to explore that, and I think it'd be really interesting to just explore a bit more and kind of take it all as a learning as well. Like what else can we do and what can we do as from a domain expert point of view to have a say in what happens to the machine learning model.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think the next question is related to these challenges to improve accuracy. Well, the question is, were there any challenges when trying to improve the accuracy and slash or reliability of the model's predictions?
Yeah, I think kind of looking into the machine learning model a bit more, I did notice that uh, there was something called like data leakage, where um, the data when you train a machine learning model, you also have data that should technically be like fully unseen by the model, so that what it's kind of like you don't want the model to um like if you kind of think about it as and if from a student point of view, it's like a student can can kind of, how to say this? They can kind of memorize past papers, and then when they see like unseen questions, they can't kind of answer them correctly. And I think that's something that's also happening in the model, because basically the machine learning model, it's kind of actually somewhat kind of seeing all of the information already, and that's kind of affecting the model performance itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but
So is it that any new information that it doesn't sort of recognize fitting a trend gets sort of
yeah,
confused by it in a way?
it just kind of gets like you'd always expect it to have a degree of that, but then in your machine learning model training process, you should be trying to do things so that um it minimizes that. And so yeah, I think that was something that I took from a learning from this project. There was something to do with the how the data was being split, that it was kind of contaminated. So that's also another point that needs to be addressed as a priority.
Of course, excellent. So we've actually got two questions which do overlap with each other that were asked within like a minute of each other, which was quite nice to see. Um, So the first question asks or states, thanks for the great talk. Could you integrate meteorological data into the model? For example, modeled meteorological data could provide insights into variation of meteorological conditions, such as wind, at each of the various air quality monitoring sites, um, which may enhance the prediction.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because obviously when we do our ADMS modeling, meteorology and meteorological data, that's always included as part of the model. And I guess when you kind of look at different like years of monitoring data, meteorology also has an impact on what those concentrations might look like. The reason why I was trying to avoid putting in meteorology was because if I was to say I want to use this model to predict a concentration in the future, then I won't necessarily have that meteorological data. So like that would end up having to either it have to be predicted or something has to happen to it, right? For it to be accounted into the model. So I was trying not to include it, but based on the model performance, it feels like it does need to be included in. So I think that's also something to explore later on, and see if, should it be included? Are there ways to, like, how might I predict that meteorological data for the future so I can apply it, the machine learning model to kind of a wider use case.
I suppose again this is thinking off the top of my head without looking fully into the project, but uh, it might be linked to like the improvements to the that linear model where you had was like 2 decades worth of air quality monitoring data, could use the sort of retrospective meteorological data for that as well, um, to help influence your projection for future years. So rather than trying to predict weather in the future, you're using your historic data to just further improve that the NO2 predictions themselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we can look into.
Excellent. And I think just the final question from the Q&A list uh, at the minute is from another anonymous asker. Noticed that while roadside and curbside identification is the most important factor, the distance to road was the third most important. Are, though, are these two similar to one another, or um, is it more beneficial to use one rather than the other? I suppose I also uh, am interested in this question as well, as I'm not quite too sure how the two differ.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So something that I tried to do when I was doing the model training, before I did the model training, there's some kind of like exploratory data analysis that you do. And one of the things that you would want to do is look at the correlation between all the different features that you're putting in, because you want to make sure that it's basically it's not like trying to explain the same things. And kind of quite surprisingly, it you would you would want to, if different features had high correlations with each other, you'd probably want to remove like one of them just to avoid that duplicated data. But when I had that correlation matrix, yeah, very surprisingly, it wasn't showing a high correlation with each other, which is why I then ended up keeping both of them in. But then I think, yeah, because since the roadside and curbside identification is showing up to be so important, like it might be something to look into further, or maybe in the next round, it's just I just want the distance to road because that should explain everything, and apply that domain knowledge to it.
Excellent, thank you. And I think just a follow-up question to that is for the distance and the identification of roadside and curbside, was that data as well collected on a sort of like an annual basis as from experience in doing like annual status reports? Some monitoring stations do end up moving, or sometimes they are reported incorrectly. So was that taken into consideration as well when developing the model?
Um, so I kind of acknowledged that as a constraint. It was just kind of an assumption that, okay, like I'll just kind of take it as it is. Um, yeah, kind of was based on like limited amount of time, and to have to go into every monitoring station and just cross-check all that data, it felt like it was way too much at this point. So so that was kind of why I just abstained from it. But yeah, I think it is kind of in the back of my mind that, yeah, sometimes that data isn't the most up to date. And yeah, again, if you're looking at 20 years of data, that monitoring station could have moved and the classification might change. And yeah, you don't really know. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Apologies. No, thank you for that question. We've got another question that has just come in. Thank you so much, Tiffany. I was wondering, based on your project, do you think there is a promise in terms of using AI to accurately predict roadside concentrations? This was going to be similar to my follow-up question if we didn't have any others, yeah, essentially, what are the future applications if this model were to be further developed and refined?
Yeah, I think it'll be definitely interesting to see where this can go. Because of, all that potential cost saving, efficiency, um, and it can just become a very powerful tool. Like I think right now we're kind of limited by um the the amount of models that we can provide, or like the predictions are kind of restrained on um how long it takes to set up a model. So if this AI machine learning model was to be useful and be able to actually accurately predict concentrations, then you can just you can kind of look at it as a tool to test scenarios very quickly, or you can just use it to predict concentrations at specific receptor locations. And I think that was kind of the idea behind why I wanted to explore if this was actually possible.
No, it's definitely very interesting, and it seems like especially as a rough estimation in the first instance, a good indicator that can be developed further. I'm also interested in, again, this is more of a philosophical point rather than one specific to your own study, but how appropriate would it be to use these machine learning models, even when further developed and further refined, for the status of like local authority compliance with your NO2 annual mean concentrations? Should we be using these AI models to essentially say, yes, this area is now compliant, and then we can like revoke an AQMA? I suppose this is more of an open-ended question to the wider audience, to sort of go away and think with in the place that AA holds in not only modeling but also policy and governance compliance in the field of air quality.
Yeah, I think that would be really exciting. Especially if you consider we normally do kind of a model verification process. So what if you still just applied a model verification factor and did that model verification? Then you can kind of prove that given like using the same kind of industry standards, we're able to predict concentrations and show how it matches up with monitoring data, right? Yeah, but that is the hope.
Yep,
Don't know,
of course,
we'll
yeah.
get there.
No, of course, I think for the time being, the model refinement is the sort of priority at the minute.
Yeah.
Excellent, but thank you for the insightful talk, Tiffany. I think just with the eye on time, we'll be ready to close off the speaker talks for today and just move up on to some closing statements. So thank you everyone for attending to listen in on the excellent talks by Adam and Tiffany. So I'd just like to give my thanks again to our speakers and for everyone in attendance today. I'll now hand back over to Amy for some final closing statements.
Great, thank you. And yeah, thank you once again from me to our presenters. Just a reminder to record your attendance at this webinar in the IES CPD tool, which you can do by logging into the members area. So if you're watching the recording on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and click on the bell icon to be notified when we post. So thank you again to all of our presenters, and thank you all for joining. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day.